Hey everyone, and welcome to the last session of day one. Have you had a good day so far? Pretty good? I've heard some people have seen lots of .NET, so they're coming for something hopefully completely different. Now, we did hear someone just mention it, but it is Valentine's Day today. Happy Valentine's Day in the audience, although watching, I am wearing red actually for Valentine's Day, so showing love to all the developers out there today. So I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Michelle Mannering, or MishManners, now Michelle Duke actually. I'm on the GitHub Developer Advocacy team. This is our amazing GitHub advocate, which you can come and get a sticker of me afterwards if you'd like. And you can follow GitHub on every social media platform. We have some amazing TikTok videos and Instagram videos and lots of cool tips and tricks about how to use GitHub. So follow our socials there, and we have all our updates and announcements and things there. Feel free to follow me as well if you have photos of the talk and share them, tweet them. I'm still going to use Twitter and tweet, so I don't know if people are calling it Zeta these days, but I'm still going to call it Twitter. So feel free to tweet or Instagram about the talk as we're going. So we're going to cover off a few things today. It's about GitHub Projects and how I use GitHub Projects to move my house. But it's also not just about that, right? It's about how we can use GitHub Projects to manage all of our projects, whether they be work projects or personal projects. So we're going to talk about project planning and tracking to start with, and what is that? And then what are GitHub Projects? So how do GitHub Projects help in our project planning and management? We're going to talk about GitHub Issues. So GitHub Issues is the piece that underpins all of GitHub Projects, and it drives our GitHub Projects. Talk about how to use GitHub Projects. I'll talk about how I used it to move our house, and also give you a whole bunch of use cases and different scenarios as well. Talk about collaboration. I have a bunch of different talks on collaboration specifically, and I love talking about this topic. So there'll be a bit of collaboration, how we can use GitHub Projects to collaborate across our teams as well. Talk about how to automate our projects using some of the really cool GitHub automation features, both built in and ones that you can build yourself. And we'll talk about migrating from classic projects to the new projects. So GitHub Projects, what I'm going to show you is relatively new, and there's the old version or the classic version. So I'll talk about if you have got existing projects in the classic version, how to migrate those over. And then finally, talk about a bunch of new things. It's a big area, GitHub Projects. We're constantly doing new updates and lots of cool things. So we'll talk about what those are and how to actually use them. So first of all, I want you to cast your mind back to the last project you worked on, whether it be personal or within your workplace. So when you build a project and you start building a project, you're collaborating, you're thinking, you're working, you're crafting. You actually have to manage and plan this project, right? There are some projects where you can not do any kind of planning and they kind of happen, but most of the time when we're talking about a project, we actually need to plan it. We need to manage that project to ensure that it gets done on time, that it's managed in the correct way, that the correct stakeholders and people have bought in. So don't actually do project management. Our project fail or not be delivered on time. How many times have we worked in teams where projects haven't been delivered on time? We have some, right? And so GitHub Projects can help us do that. So we tried to manage a project without build a project, be like playing without a game plan. This is from a famous American football player. Not that I like American football. I don't know if there's no quotes from Australian football players. So now, when we are starting out with a project, some people, like myself, I'm a bit of a list builder, right? So when we're creating our project, we might sit down and write a list of to-dos, a list of tasks. We might delegate them out. I like lists because you feel really good when you tick them off and you're like, yay, that thing's done. We also might visualize our project. This is for a movie board, a storyboard, but even if we're working on a development project or maybe even a construction project, we often visualize what that project is going to look like. We might also discuss our project with our teammates. If it's work, discuss it if it's a family project, or our friends if we're planning something. So we usually discuss something, right? Now, most of the time these days as well, we'll use some sort of digital platform to plan out our project. We might use OneNote to write lists. We might do Kanban boards, a whole bunch of different project management tools out there today, and a lot of AI ones too. But the one we're going to talk about today is GitHub Projects. So GitHub Projects under this larger banner called GitHub Issues. So GitHub Issues is what drives and powers GitHub Projects. So this includes all different GitHub issue features, planning, tracking, and then right through to all our different project management features, right? So how do we actually use GitHub Projects to plan, manage, and build something, or in this case, move a house? So my husband and I, who actually happens to be in today, so thank you for coming to my talk, we bought a house. Like all good developers, when you buy a house, you turn to GitHub. In this case, we turn to GitHub Projects. So all our projects are located in, we can get into a couple of locations. One is on the side and one is on our new global feature. So if we click on projects, we can see all of our projects are listed here. So this is how we get to our projects and navigate to our projects. How do we start moving our house with GitHub Projects? So the first thing we do is we need to create a project folder for this. In this case, a repository. A repository called Moving House. This is going to house all the features that we need to move the house. And in this case, plan out the project, right? So we can create a project here, a repository here. We're going to make it private because I don't really need everyone else seeing the house that we move. We can open up a README and put some information there, what this repository is about. In this case, I don't really need much information. You might have noticed too, I didn't click that we needed a git ignore file. I'm not using any code for this one. And we don't need a license either because it's not public. So here I'm going to put a nice commit message in, and now our folder, our project folder, is ready and set up to go. So we now have this repository. So to start planning and managing our project, we need to create that task list that I was talking about for me. I'm a bit of a list maker. GitHub Issues, we've traditionally used GitHub Issues for feature requests and bugs and things like that. In this case, I'm using it for an overall big list tracking issue. Think of this like a master list of all the things that we need for our project. In our case, we quite a long settlement on our house. So I'm going to break out my major task list in time boxes. Unlike a dev sprint where we're doing a couple of weeks, we might have to-dos and things like that. In this case, I wanted to time box it in by the kind of big blocks. So prior to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks out, 2 to 3 weeks before moving day, 1 week, the day before, the day of, and even after. So now that I've kind of created these like little sub-headings, if you will, I can go in and start adding all the list items I need. So in this case, this is a task list, and I'm just writing in here. So purchasing the house is a pretty good place to start. If you're like us and you have a mortgage on your house, you probably do. We need to sort out the mortgage. We also moved further away from the city, so I needed to purchase a car. Internet's really important for me, working in a development company, so I needed to do an NBN upgrade and start doing a few of these things that we need for the house, right? So I've got all this information, so I'm just going to, and these are all the little bits and pieces, right? So once I've got my major list built out, and then a housewarming party is a really important thing to do after you buy a house, right? So put the housewarming party in there, and now I've got my overall tracking list, or the master list, ready to go for our project. Now what we can do is we can convert this into what. So you see up the top here, we've got 52 tasks up here. So that's telling me there's 52 different tasks in here. And what I'm doing here is I can quickly and automatically convert these into issues. So clicking the button on the side to convert to issue is converting each list item into its own separate issue within this repository that I've opened. So within the repository that I'm working with. Now, when I open this, it just opens a blank issue with the title of the list item that I made. And so I can go in and fill this out. I can create lists within lists as well, which is what I'm doing here. So this is sorting out end of lease. So we were in a rental before. We needed to serve the notice, patch things up. I can even go back to the major list and grab a list item and copy and paste the URL and put it in here. And when we do that, it links directly to that, so that when we look at that issue, we can see that it's linked to this task. So we can see here up the top that it's linked to the major tracking issue here, and there are 7 tasks within this subtask. So that's how we can kind of build out our lists and track which list item links back to another list item here. So here I'm like, the cleaners have been booked. This is what we're doing. We need to provide them with all the information. And then when we can see there, we can see that all the history of what I've done with this issue comes up there as well. Now, once we've got each of our issues open or our major tracking list, we can add some labels. So we can see here on the side, there's no labels, and these are all the default labels provided by the repository. Now, since this isn't a coding-based repository, there's a lot of labels, bugs and enhancements and help wanted and features. I didn't need any of those, so I deleted the whole lot. And now I can go in and create my own custom labels that makes more sense for moving a house. So I have a Lancer, my husband has a Subaru, so we've made a Lancer and Subi little notes there, so things we need to sort out with the car. And I've added all these things in here that are going to make sense. So I'm kind of grouping the tasks that I need to do into like these little groups. So here, these are the kind of things that made sense for us. So things that had a priority, things that needed contacting other people. And I can go in here, and once I've created those labels, is apply those labels, one or as many as I like, really, to the particular issue. I can also assign someone. In this case, I can assign myself to this issue. And now I can see, again, that it comes up in the history here. So I can go back and I can see all the different things that I've done here. So now what I can do is, you probably saw at the start when I was making these, I had 52 task items. That's a lot of issues. Imagine going to every single one and changing the labels of every single issue. It'd probably take a while. So I've made it a little bit easier now. We can now bulk add things. So if I select the whole lot, I can just go and assign myself to the whole lot there, and it goes bang and just assigns me to all of them. It's because I did all the work. No, I'm just kidding. You did a lot of work too. I can select the ones that I want for the labels I want here. So I can select the ones that I want on the side, and then I can click up the top and select the labels that I want applied to those issues. So this makes that management a little bit easier now. Now, I think 48 is the total number of issues shown on each screen, so you do need to go between pages if you do have a lot of issues, but being able to do this in bulk makes a really, really big difference. So once we've added all the labels in, we can now have a look at the layout of the whole lot. So we can see here our major tracking list looks good. I've added a couple of labels there. We can have a look at our our main list here. Everything's looking pretty nice. We've got nice labels on everything. We've assigned everything. Everything's got the right information in it. And we're pretty much ready. But as you might have seen, so far, all I've done is assigned myself to everything. I'm doing all the work. But we know that's not the case when we're working on projects, right? To effectively execute a project, we usually collaborate with other people. And again, as I had mentioned at the start, I love talking about collaboration, and I always show lots and lots of really amazing quotes about collaboration. It's just one I want to show today. This is one from Helen Keller, which is, alone, we can only do so little, right? It's together where we actually achieve a lot of things. So collaboration is important to be able to do everything that we want to do. When we're working on a project in a company, we need a lot of different ideas. We need diversity of opinion, diversity of thought, and diversity of knowledge and discipline in order to execute that project effectively. So how do I ensure that other people can come and work with me on this project? This is a repository that's under my name. We could have done it under an org as well. But right now, it's just me working on this. So the first thing we need to do is add someone else to the organization in this sense. So as I mentioned, my husband and I moved together, so I want to actually assign him to some tasks, and I also want him to be able to see this repository and see what is going with the house move. So I've sent him an invite, and that invite will go to his email address, GitHub account. Now, thankfully, he accepted, which is really nice. Thank you for accepting my invite. And now once he's added into the repository, I can manage the access, which is really good. You can give people view access if you wanted to as well. So now he's added to it. He can see everything. So now I can start assigning him some of the tasks that I created. I go into the issues, again, I can use that bulk functionality. I can select the ones I want to assign him to, and I can click the drop down and assign those issues to him. Now he can go and see them, and he can go and see the layout that I've created as well, and see each task that I've created. Now all we've done to date is create a bunch of lists, right? We've got our major tracking list, like our master list. We've added a bunch of subtasks. Each of those subtasks have some information in them as well. But when we think about a project, we often think of that visualization feature. When I was younger, I used Microsoft Projects, remember the little bars and the tracking, right? We often like to visualize the things we do. So how do we take what I've created already, all these lists and tasks and items, how do we take that and build it into a more visual project layout where we can actually visually see the status of our project? This is where GitHub Projects comes into it. So I'm going to now create the project. I've got my list, everything's ready to go, right? I can create a project under a repository or an organization in this sense, or even my own just personal profile. In this sense, I want to create the project under the repository itself because I've already added my husband as a collaborator. So all the projects or all the things that I create and the views of the project, I want the current people who are in the repository have access to that, right? So I'm going to create the project under the repository, and we can see here that we've just got a blank template, if you will. So I can name the project, I can give it a little description. In this case, I'm going to put the day of our move. First up, we can actually just see visually straight away what date we're moving. So put that in there and save that. I can create a file that's specific for the project as well, so that's outside the repository. So think about if you're starting off a big project, you might have a repository README and then you have a project README. So again, we can create it here. Project, and we can even link to another already existing project. In this case, I'm creating the new project. So click the drop down, create the project, and click the green button to actually create that project. So now that we have the bare bones of the project, we want to go and add all those tasks that I just created, all those lists and things. So I can go in here, I can find the repository that's linked to, which is the current one we're working in, and I can add them in each individually. So I'm pressing the enter button to add them in quickly. But we can, again, bulk add items. We don't have to sit there and add each one individually. So I click the plus button, we can go and add every single, or pull requests. If you've got pull requests open within the repository, we can add them all at once. So when I click the repository that I'm working in, which is this current one, I can just add the whole lot. Makes it relatively easy. I can even add tasks and issues from another repository. If I have here, so I can go and add a URL of an existing issue, and I can copy and paste that down there and it'll pop up there. Now, the interesting thing about it'll add and link that issue to the repository, but if the person who has view access to this project doesn't have view access to that repository where that issue is linked, they won't be able to see it, which can be a good thing. We'll talk about that later. So by default, the project creates this table layout, and we can go and have a look at this. We can see and use this little flyout banner to click the issue that we're looking at. It gives us an overview, it gives us some information about it, and we can see that we've got this kind of just basic table layout, right? But not everyone likes to see things in tables. I'm a little bit more visual. I like to see a bit more kind of across the spectrum. So we can convert this or switch this up into a board if we want. I can create a new view here and open a board. And it just gives us a relatively standard basic board. And I can go in here and I can change the status of an issue and it'll move across. Status of that major tracking issue. So if we click it again, here I can go over here and change the status. So to do, in progress, and done is kind of the standard. I can change that and it'll just pop over to that column. Now again, if I wanted to do that for each one, that might take a while. So I'll show you in a little bit how to do this automatically. But as you can see here, relatively basic Kanban board style view. We've got no to do, in progress, done. For a house that's not necessarily what I want to see, right? What if I want to customize that? Luckily with GitHub Projects, like all good things at GitHub, we can completely customize everything here. So I don't want to have this as to do. I want to have this as my overall tracking. So I want that major tracking issue to be always there right at the front. And you remember when I built that list, it was time boxed prior to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I'm going to change these and make these the time box things that I created all those issues under. So I can come here, I can give them a label, I can give them a color as well, and even write in the description. So in the description here, I've written the date so that when I look at our project board, I can quickly see across the spectrum what the dates are of each column. And then I can, again, drag and drop them into if I want to, but that takes a while. So if we go to our table view and drag and change the status of them all at once if we need to. We can do this with assignees or any other views that we have there on that table. So now once we've got them all done, we can see it's looking pretty good. We've got this a kind of a basic board style, which makes a little bit more sense to us. I can even create little draft issues like draft cards. So I'm creating a little draft there and I'm just moving it up. So what that'll do is create a draft of an issue or kind of just leave it there as a note if you don't actually want to convert it into an issue. I can even provide it with a full description and give it an assignee and a label, but it won't actually convert it into an issue if I don't need it to be an issue. So that's really cool. Now we can further customize this and personalize this if we want to. I like to see and change the names of the views. So up here, I don't just want the default, which is view 1, view 2, and however many views you've got. So I'm going to name these things, make a little bit more sense. So one of them is going to be overview table and overview board. So I can go and create a new view and change it to what I want. In this case, I'm creating a new view and I'm filtering it by a particular label. In this case, all the issues where I needed the money, where money was required to do the task. And I've created that as a filter and saved that as a new view. And I've created a new view there too called Assign to Me. Now, what's really cool about that Assign to Me feature is that if I go onto it, I will see all the issues assigned specifically to me. If my husband goes, he'll see all the issues specifically assigned to him rather than putting assignee at MishManners. Because then if he goes and looks at it, he's going to see all the things that are assigned to me. But assigned to, like, at me means that the person who's looking at it, the person who's signed to GitHub will just assigned to them, which can be very useful. I can also go and change this and add different filters if I want. So in this case, I really like having labels, so I can do it like that. So I'm just going to show you this really again quickly. So just changing the name of the view by double-clicking the view up the top there and writing in whatever I want. You'll notice here when I create a new one too and put that one in for money needed, we can even use emojis, which I think is really cool. And we can save that view as well. So anytime you see a little blue dot up the top of your tab, that means you've made a change within the view and it hasn't been saved to that particular view. So you see the blue dot there. Now, if I save it, it means it'll be saved there. That URL, I can now share that out to anyone else. So that URL is specific to that view I'm looking at. So if I shared that to you, you'll see exactly what I've got on the screen here, which is very useful. So I can see by status as well and break it down by status. I can break it down by overall tracking and just see lots of different views. I was showing someone really briefly before this talk and they're like, I really need to play around with this and see different views and things like that. And some of these have just been added too, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I promised you some automation because all good projects have automation. So these are some of the automation features that are built into the project by default. So there's a whole bunch of them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And they're built in by default. And we can either turn them off or on. We can change them, edit them. So I can say that, you know, if when a pull request is merged, in this case, it's probably going to be when a label is changed from one status to another, I can set the value to do something, right? So these are all the default things. And edit them and change them, rename them, be able to do some of this automation that we like. Another really cool piece of automation I absolutely love is this auto task feature. Here I've got a list of things that need doing for the car. So if I go and tick off a few things in there, and we can see there that I've got a bunch of stuff, I've even linked out to other things. Now, if I go and change all this and make sure, okay, look, all the things have been done, I'm really happy with this. if I go now and update this and say, yep, this is now done, if I go and close this issue, so if it's done here, if I go and close that, so now this issue is, so right here, yep, the rojo is done, we've purchased the car, the transfer has all been complete, which is cool, I got a car, yay. You can see it on my Instagram if you want. So I can say that and close the comment. Now, if we go back to where this is originally tracked in number 1, so if we go back to there, and it's going to take a second to go over. Yep, so if we go back to here, we can now see that that task list is now marked. Let me come in here. Now marked as, where is it? Purchase the car at the top. It is now marked as complete. I didn't have to go and tick that box off. Because I closed the issue, it ticks it as a done task in the original tracking issue where it was originally tracked, which I think is really cool. Another view I like back in the projects is timeline view. So timeline is really important or really useful for when we've got a lot of things with dates. So here, this is the fully complete one, and I've added in the dates for when things need to be done. And we can see what it looks like as a big view. Now, this looks really cool on an ultra-wide monitor because you can actually see a bit more of a date. Looking at it without markers, it's a bit hard to see. We can see little arrows of where things need to be done. If we put little markers or like milestone markers, we can actually see that when we're scrolling across, there's a task that is due on that date, and we can easily and quickly see that. Now, I mentioned collaboration is really important, so being able to share these project boards is really useful. So again, we can make a project as well, so I can copy a project, I can send it to another repository, another owner, and I can use that URL again for any of these views to send out to anyone else, which is useful. Another really useful feature is I love working in GitHub. I think GitHub is awesome. I could do everything in GitHub if it was able to do everything for me. But my husband loves Excel. He really loves working in Excel. So if you want to talk to me about Excel, he absolutely loves it. Now, what's really cool about GitHub Projects is I can actually export this project into a TSV file so that he can look at it in Excel. It can be viewed in Google Sheets or in a FigJam, any kind of file that supports TSVs, so that if anyone wants to do other things or dive into some of the specifics, they could do that as well. So now that we've our move, yay, there's boxes everywhere. This is definitely not a photo of our house, by the way. This is AI generated. Our house does not look that neat. So now we've finished and had a look at it, let's have a look at what our project board looks like complete. So you can see here, it's looking pretty good. We've got our nice overall tracking issues. Some items have been marked off. Some items have been closed. And we've linked out to different things. We've got all the different views that we can look at and share. We can see a task that have been assigned to us. We can see all our pretty labels that I've created there, and even the little icons that show who's actually been assigned to that. So I think this is looking really, really nice. Once we've got a project board that's relatively complete, we can start doing some really cool things with it as well. So we can dive into the data and the metrics. So if we have a look at our status, we can have a look and configure this chart to how we want. Now, because we're mainly working in issues for this one, some of the data that you see here is a little bit limited. I like seeing it like this, which shows it by the status and then a sub category by issues. So that's kind of a little bit more useful. If you have a project with a lot of milestones, or you're working on a project in a big organization, some of the assignees or the milestones will be really, really useful for you. So if it's something you're playing with and working with, I'd highly encourage you to go look into the data. It's really cool, and some of the statistics and analytics you can do there. Is relatively new, and we're constantly working on it. It's a really, really fun, cool feature, and there's lots of really cool new things, which some of them we've just released, some of them have been around a little bit longer, but I'm going to talk about some of the new things that we've launched recently so you can go and have a look at. The first one, which I showed you right at the beginning but didn't quite mention it, is called Global Projects. So if I go to my projects view, I can now see all the projects that I'm involved in. I can quickly see the description of them. I can see them here. If I go back over to projects, so there's two ways I can get to them. There's global projects view. If these had more information, these boards, I could see that as well. I'm going to show you a little bit more on this in a minute as well. So as I mentioned, GitHub Projects is under this large banner called GitHub Issues. So we call this GitHub Projects powered by GitHub Issues. So this was something we launched or announced back in November 2021 at GitHub Universe, and this was GA in July 2022. So I'm like, we're in 2024 now, right? So since we launched this, it's been amazing and really fun and really cool, and people are absolutely loving it. So if you used projects, GitHub Projects, because GitHub Projects itself has been around for longer than this. So if you use GitHub Projects prior to this launch, you would be working in what we call GitHub Classic Projects. So if you have an old existing project in a classic project, how do you transfer that into this new experience without going and rebuilding the entire thing? So we can migrate those classic projects. So I've got one here. Now, if I open up, it looks a little bit like this. It's a bit interesting, a bit different. I can click this Start Migration button that pops up when I open this project. And I can click Start Migration, and I am given the option of closing the existing project and opening it, or just leaving it open there. Also, if I go back to my projects view, I can close it, I can migrate it by clicking that little ellipsis next to it and clicking Migrate. So there's two ways you can migrate an existing classic project to this new projects experience. Something relative only in December last year is these project templates. So you can only do this for an organization, not just a personal repository. So these are at the org level, not the repository level. So you can go and create a template. Say, for example, you're working in a development team and you have a project board for every dev sprint, and your dev sprints are 2 weeks. Creating a new project every 2 weeks might be a bit of a hassle, right? So now we can create these templates. So here I can go to my organization, I can choose the org that I want. In this case, I'm just going to use VX, which is one of my demo orgs, and I can create a new template there. So instead of clicking project, I create a new template. So I can call this the sprint board, and I'm going to call it the default project board for all the sprints that I'm going to create. So I can use this template, again, give it the owner and give it a name and save it here. Now, any views change in here, labels and things like that, that will all save into the template when I click save over on the side there. So anytime I open up a new template or a new sprint board and use this template, all that existing information is already there, which saves a lot of time. We also have templates. So these are templates that GitHub has provided. So when you open a new project for the first time, you'll be provided with this list of options of how you would like to create your project. I skipped over this at the start because I didn't want to spoil this part of it, but these templates were just launched in December, and every time you open a new project, you'll be presented with these options. So again, if we have a look here, we've got a whole bunch of them. So we've got, these are being sorted by the most featured, but you can see here we've got some for team planning, a feature release, iterative development, bug improvement. There's a whole bunch of different ones here. So I'm going to choose the feature release one, and it gives me a whole bunch of these views already there and ready to go, so I don't have to go in and customize that. I can customize this further if I want, but it gives me a good starting point so I don't have to rebuild everything from scratch every time I create a new project. This one, which just launched in January not the 14th, because today is the 4th, January the 18th, so less than a month old this is. So this is called Project Status Updates. So I can go into any project and I can give it a status and also update that status. So in this instance here, a status update, I can give it a little bit of a description for this update, and I can give it a status of complete, in progress, at risk, and give it a start and end date. In this case, I chose the start and end date of our moving. Also, I realized it's in US dates, which is really annoying. So when I chose the 21st of July, it defaulted back to the 20th of July, and I'm like, what? They just don't like us on the other side. So no, it's fine. They do like us. So here I can provide this update, and when I save that update, that's there on that status board. So every time I add a new update, so I can add as many updates as I want, they'll all pop up there so I can scroll through and see who's posted the update, what was in that update, if they give it a description, and the status of it. So once I've actually done that as well, and when I'm looking at my global project view, I can quickly, so if I have a look here at my global project view, I can quickly see the status of all the projects there. Now, some of them don't have status on my view, but the ones that do, we can see that. What are the use cases for projects? So I've just used it to move my house. There are so many use cases for GitHub projects. So a couple of years ago, one of the people at GitHub wrote a blog on all the different ways people use GitHub projects. And what they were found in this a bit of research is people were using it not just for work, they were using it for their personal lives, and they were using it for so many different things as well. So people were using it in their day-to-day lives for learning boards, project tracking. I saw someone use it for planning a holiday, right? So we've used it to move our house. 2023 was a bit married as well. So we, again, like all good developers, we turned to GitHub when we got married. We used GitHub Copilot to build our wedding, that's a whole nother talk. So build our website for our wedding, that's a whole nother talk. But we also use GitHub Projects to plan out our entire wedding. So I've got here, instead of having it time boxed, I put it by category. So I've got here, what I do for the website, things I need to do for the shower, for the reception, for the dinner. This really saved us. We got engaged on the 5th of August and we got married on the 9th of December. So we had less than 4 months to plan, traveling in between it as well. So GitHub Projects was a great way to be able to do everything. Again, I added my husband to this, and while I was overseas traveling, I'd be updating things on my time. And then when he'd get up in the morning, he would be able to see it as well. When he finishes his day at work, he'd be able to see the things I've worked on. In these issues, they work just like normal GitHub issues. I can add in images, I can add in videos, I can add links and things so that people can see what's actually happening. Now, what's interesting about this one as well, I've got issues from a couple of different repositories. So I created a repository for our wedding and added my husband to it so he could see the repository. But I also created another private repository that he wasn't in for all the bridal stuff, like my wedding dress and things like that. And again, I had them on the board, but because he didn't have access to that repository, he couldn't go in and see the photos that I was posting for my wedding dress and those kind of things that your husband apparently isn't supposed to see till the wedding day. We also use it for house maintenance. Once we're finished moving, we transferred a lot of the issues that either hadn't been completed or that had a longer timeline. We converted that into, or translated a lot of those issues into a new project board, and we now have one for house maintenance and house improvements. So able to take those issues and create a new board and be able to do this as well. Another more common way to use GitHub Project is development. My favorite boards because of the way they've just really utilized all the features. So we can see here that they've got this project board that has status, planning, not started, building. This looks like a very typical development project. So I've got here their roadmap, they've called it, but it's all their milestones as well. The team capacity, so we can see all the assignees on the side. The epic planning for those really big project tasks that need doing. We can even go and have a look at the priority of everything. So this one has everything sorted by priority. So we can sort all our lists and issues by status and then by a secondary one as well if we want to here. So again, we can go and look at the flyout here. I'm going to show it again because I love it. So all our squads on the side here. So if I'm in squad number 1, I can see all the things that we're doing. You probably can't see it in the back room, but the squads are labelled by like little aquatic animals. So there was a dolphin and a crab and then a little tiger as well. So I was like, I can be on the dolphin team. So we can go have a look at all these amazing, look how many views they've got for this project. So many different project views. The epic planning, as I mentioned, the priority, which we can see everything is by height, and these team labels as well. And then we can see everything by assignees. We can see it by different people. So here's this status updates, and they've put more status updates than I put in mine. So we can go back and see the different statuses that Riley, the project manager, has actually listed. Risk to complete to on track. So that's really, really, really cool. They've been able to do that. Feature builds, this is the project board for Android, one of the things that they are working on. They do a project board for each feature they're working on. Most of these ones here are bug fixes. But you can see this is the way they've built it out. There's only one view here. It's mostly a table view, but they've also broken it out by these labels so we can view and sort these by labels. Another really cool view, a cool way to use GitHub Projects is roadmaps. So GitHub uses this particular feature a lot. So if you go to our GitHub public roadmaps, this is what our public roadmap looks like. It's a project board. So we can go in here, we can click an issue, we can see all the information that's in that particular issue. Along the top, they've grouped it by products, so we can see things that are coming that are generally available, what's coming to the cloud or github.com, GitHub Enterprise, advanced security issues, actions, and we can go in and we can sort as well and see all the information there for each particular feature. Something else that's really, really cool is we heard someone say you've been seeing a lot of .NET, a lot of cloud stuff. You have not seen in this presentation a single line of code. So what I really like about GitHub Projects is you don't need to use GitHub Projects. So when I mentioned before that collaboration is really important and being able to collaborate effectively across teams and across disciplines, this is one of the reasons why I love GitHub Projects so much, because I'm able to use this for those people who don't particularly have really in-depth coding experience. So managers can see this, marketing people can see this, legal. You don't need coding experience to do all the things that I just showed you. A little bit is helpful, but there's not a single line of code I've written in any of those things I showed you, the readmes, the labels, the issues, creating new labels, even some of the automation that was all just drag and drop, the automation that is already built into GitHub. So at GitHub, we use GitHub Projects across pretty much every different team at GitHub. So we have the legal team using GitHub Projects to track all the things they're doing. We have the marketing team using project boards to track events they are part of. Developer relations team has a bunch of different projects. We do have a dev sprint board as well, but we have for all the events that we're part of, all these speaking engagements we're doing, all the things that we're doing as part of the open source maintainers or the GitHub stars. So there's so many different ways that we can use GitHub Projects, even if we don't have coding background. So if you're sitting there and you work in a team with people who don't necessarily have coding experience, or you work in a team where not everyone is a developer, using GitHub Projects is such a great way for everyone to have view and scope of the project. So when I showed our house move project board to a friend, one of them was a developer, one of them wasn't, they said, we're getting on this right away because it means our entire team can see exactly what is happening with our project. How many times have you heard of companies where they say, oh, well, our marketing is ready to go and it got shipped out, but we just heard from the development team that the project is not on track, so the marketing is out, but the feature isn't available. We've seen that and heard that a few times, right? So by having everyone in the same place, we can actually see what is happening. We can see the status of things without having to call someone up and go, how's it going with the status? Is that feature ready yet? Can we send out all our marketing material? Or even vice versa. Hey, our feature is ready to ship. Where are we at with the legals? Where are we at with the marketing? Everyone can see the scope and the status of the project. We can see if things are not on track, if they're behind. So using this is such a great way to work collaboratively across the team. As I mentioned before, we can add to that project. It doesn't just have to be issues. We can add in pull requests, so open pull requests, closed pull requests, and things like that as well. So being able to have a project living in the same place where all our code, all our project, all our features, all the software we ship is such a really good experience. And I encourage you to get your other team members who are non-developers onto GitHub as well. And if you're worried about them, they might have access to the code and break things, there are so many different permissions you can set within the repository to ensure that people don't or can't merge a pull request without a reviewer or can't write code if they just want to be a viewer. So that's another talk. So again, coming out of that GitHub little bit of research that we did, we found that GitHub Projects has this innate ability to allow for unlimited amount of use cases. And this was posted, this blog we did was July 2022. So again, we're still only scratching the surface of what's possible. As I mentioned, the latest feature we shipped for GitHub Projects was January the 18th with that status update. So we're constantly making new updates, constantly seeing how the community is using this project. So the next time you're working on a project, whether you are moving house or building a new feature or working on a new software project or even a roadmap or even doing some event planning, whether it's a wedding or a 50th or a party or Valentine's Day, I encourage you to think about using GitHub Projects because you can get everyone on there, you can effectively manage everything, and everything that I've showed you is free, right? GitHub Projects is free to use on a free github.com account. So you don't have to pay for anything extra. Having a GitHub account is free as well, okay? And also, I encourage you, if you are using it, to explore and experiment. People use GitHub Projects in so many different ways, as I mentioned, from work projects to personal projects. So I would encourage you to think about and explore the different possibilities. Play around with those different views. There's so many, I think there would be probably almost infinite possibilities in the way that you can configure those views and put all the different ways that you want to see things, sort by label first and then by assignee and create this new view and that new view. Using the status updates to update your team on the status of the project so that when I glance at my global projects, I can see all the projects that I'm part of. I can see which ones are at risk and which ones I need to go into and see how I can help and collaborate on that. So here's a link to all resources for this talk. So it's a link to that the developer research study that I mentioned where we had a look at all the different ways people are using GitHub Projects. There's a link to all the different ways that I was using GitHub Projects in terms of assigning people to tasks, automating different things. There's links to how you can do all that. There's a link to create your own GitHub Octocat. If you like the Octocat on the very first slide that I had with little me on it, you can create your own as well. Now, we do have a few minutes for questions, so I might open it up for questions and then finish 5 minutes early so you have plenty of time to go and get ready for the boat cruise tonight. So do we have any questions from the audience on using GitHub Projects? There is a microphone as well, so we have someone running around with a microphone. Yep.
So it has to be
linked.
So like if you're...
The task on the board?
Yeah, so with the project, it has to be with an issue in a repo, I guess is more what I mean. So if you have more of a vertical slice approach where it's covering across multiple repositories, I know you started to add them, but the seemed like the project still had to exist in one of those repos.
The project itself doesn't have to exist anywhere. So you can create the project at a high level. So you can create the project. I'll go back to the dev sprint one because that's an interesting one. This is under the projects org on GitHub, which is interesting for a demo. And we've called it the Octo Invaders repository. So this is a project we've created under this repository, and we can link out issues from all different repos. So the issue itself has to exist somewhere unless you create, like I showed you before, a draft task, and it just becomes like a note, if you will. So if you're using like a standard Kanban style, you might have a bunch of things linked out, and then you might have notes in there as well. So GitHub Classic Projects called it notes. We now call it drafts because unlike the classic projects, a note was just a note. Whereas now if we want to write a whole bunch of things and it ends up becoming something that we do want to track, add more information, maybe add labels and more assignees and things like that, then we can go and convert that note into an issue as well. And when we convert it, we can choose the repository that we want to create that under as well. So if we've got a project board at the org level, we might be linking out to a whole bunch of different. So for example, in GitHub, we have over 1,000 repositories, and we have a bunch of projects sitting at the org level. And there might be issues and pull requests and even draft notes that are going out to all different parts of the organization, but we can all see it. if that makes sense.
Yep.
Cool. Question right at the back. Do you mind grabbing the microphone so we can hear you? Thank you.
The question I'm having is, we'll say you have an issue that is dependent with another issue. So can it be done in projects?
So when I added the major tracking issue and then I've got subtasks under that and then another subtask, can I add those subtasks to the project as well?
So we'll say you have the issue 1 and we'll say you have issue 5. We'll say in order to complete that issue 5, you need to complete issue 1 first, kind of thing. So it's kind of like a dependency. So can it be added for the projects?
As in link down, so it links under and you can see that if one closes, the next one closes, or just having it as part of a card on the project?
Yeah, so something that we see on a Gantt charts kind of thing. So kind of like a dependency.
Yeah, so it doesn't visually link to it. So if we have a look here, actually, I'm just going to open up, fingers crossed the internet works here and I can do this. So I'm going to open up one of them. And what it does is you can add it to the project, but it won't visually have a link to it, like, you know, a little line or something. But if we have a look at the project, so I'll just open up one of them. Oh, thank you. I'll mirror the screens. It's really weird too because there is a mirror at the back of the screen and back of the room, and I didn't even see that. So I'll just duplicate those. Keep changes. Perfect. And we can see that. All right. So if we have here, so we can see here, this is the major tracking issue, right? When I open, it's super slow here. So we can see these ones. We can see a bunch of them are linked out. And then if I click one that's got more ones in it, let's just say this one, does that one have it? That one looks like it has one there. So we can see there is, I'm going to turn dark mode off here as well, sorry. Turn off. So if we can see here, every single one of my issues in this project is attached to this board. But if I want to see if it's dependent on a previous issue, I have to click into it. So I click into, say, this one here and have a look at it. It will tell me when I open it up in a new tab, rather than just a little flyout, it will tell me where it's actually linked and located. So I can see here 4 or 5 tasks are being done in this. I can see this is being tracked in number 1. So that's tracked in the major issue. So that's how I see the linking out to it. If I go back to that major issue again, like this, I think one of them, the end of lease one, actually does have, yeah, so this one has something here. If I click one of these subtasks in here, so transfer utilities, hopefully I've got no personally identifiable information here, we can see here but if I scroll down and have a look at the history, I can see it was mentioned back in this issue. It was also mentioned in this. So if I have a look at the history, I can see where it's linking and tracking. It's always going to link and track to like a hierarchy. So up the top here, it's only going to show number 1 because that's the first issue that's tracked to. So if it wasn't tracked in number 1, it would show number 9. Or if it was tracked in number 2 and 7, it would show 2 because 2 is in the hierarchy. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. How are we for time? We've still got a couple of minutes if anyone wants to ask any other questions. Or are we all keen to get on the boat and go for a Valentine's Day? Oh, we do have another question. It's very interesting that I decided to do a boat cruise on Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it was a good talk.
My pleasure.
Thank you for that. And I was wondering, with the free plans, is there any limit to number of repos or projects that you can create?
No. So a free GitHub plan now has unlimited private and public repositories. So you'd be limited on the amount of features you could potentially use. So for example, each user has 60 hours of free code spaces usage every single month. So if you go over that, that's when you'll get charged for that. You have a certain amount of actions usage. GitHub Copilot is an extra feature you'll need to pay for as well. But in terms of the number of repositories, you have unlimited both private and public repositories
And
now.
how about collaborators?
Unlimited collaborations too, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I reckon like once I heard that question, I could think of another question, related
Yep.
question. So are there like a way to represent blockers and things like that? Let's say one issue blocks the other one. Is there a way to represent that?
There's a few different ways I've seen people do it. There's no like default way, if you will. People have done it different ways. It's like saying to me, how would you build a general project view for going on a holiday? There are multiple different ways to do it. Some people have got some really good examples online that you can have a look at as well. The last thing that I will say too is that we do have a really great repository. I can't think of it off the top. It's github.com community discussions. I think I'll double check it for you. But if you have any like feature requests and things, this is our repository for where you can go in and put in feature requests or questions and things like that. This is something, and I actually linked to this in my resources as well. So that status update that we shipped in January was because someone requested that feature specifically. So we've got a link out to that as well, and we've even shipped it into the community discussion saying we've got this new status update. What do you all think about it? So community discussions is a great way to see the latest new features that we're releasing and collaborate on them, ask questions about them, and see how other people are using them as well. So there is a showcase feature on here too, where some people have showcased the ways that they've used not just GitHub Projects, but other things as well. So that pretty much takes us to time. So I did want to say thank you very much for listening to my talk today. Thank you to NDC for having me here. And I will say very finally too, if you do have any, I'll pop that resources link up just quickly as well. So grab that because that has all the resources that I talked about. But if you do have questions that either we didn't get to because of time or something you'd like to ask later in private or whatever, feel free to come and chat to me. I'm here over the next 2 days at NDC, or if you're watching this on the recording or you think of a question after the week, please feel free to reach out to me on pretty much any of the social media platforms. I will do my best to get back to you. Happy to talk to you, and I hope you enjoyed the talk, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.